Mr. Hilsman,
Here.
Mr. Martin, Mr. Osterling,
Here.
Ms. Garipian.
Okay. Are there any public comments on any of the closed session items? Hearing no one, we will now adjourn to the closed session.
Let's do that.
Do I do pause it or?
Meeting of the Board of Trustees will now convene in open session. We have one reportable action item. In closed session, the board unanimously took action to release an employee from the position of classified manager pursuant to Education Code 72411.5. 7 yes, 0 no's, and 0 abstains. Okay, at this time, let's see. We have the pledge. Are we going to convene the annual? Oh, we're going to convene the organizational meeting? Okay. Do we? Are we going to go over the procedure then?
Well, we have Attorney Warren Kinsler who will go over the procedure with us.
Okay.
You'll excuse me for being so impertinent as to point out we need to do the pledge first?
Well, it has the pledge after this, but we could
Oh, okay.
reorder it.
It's my understanding from Dr. Verdian that for the last 9 years at least, it's always been the case that there has been one person nominated and elected to serve as the board president for the ensuing year. It's also my understanding that this year we have more than one person who may be interested in holding that office. And the question arises, how should we proceed with that election? Your board bylaws do incorporate Robert's rules. And I have taken a quick look at Robert's rules, and as we usually find out when it comes to public agencies, they don't really fit all that well, but there is some valuable guidance there. And so what I would recommend to the board in terms of your procedure would be that the board president would open nominations for that office, the office of president. Are there any nominations? Nominations are made. A second is not required on nominations, but it's not uncommon, of course, for that to occur. Once there are no more nominations, or there is a motion to close nominations, you would be in the position of proceeding to a vote. And one of the you have two options there. If you had, for example, 3 nominations, you could decide that we'll have a vote, and if none of the 3 get 4 votes, then you would proceed to a second round of voting, which would eliminate the lowest vote getter of the 3 and proceed to the 2, or depending on what your choice or preference would be, you could leave all 3 candidates in and continue voting. The goal being, though, to get to 4 votes, at least. So that's sort of the process in a nutshell that I would recommend to you. How you proceed is up to the board at this point.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we will open nominations for the board chair.
You're going to have the pledge first?
Oh, okay, well, I thought we were going to convene the organizational meeting. So are we I guess at this time, we should ask whether or not there's going to be a reorganization of the agenda, and then we'll move the pledge up before that. Is that right? I'm looking at the agenda. The
I'm
agenda
looking at
says-
an agenda that says we're convening the organizational meeting, then the pledge, intros, recognitions, then election of board officers, then certification of signatures,
Oh, you're
et
right.
cetera, et
You're
cetera.
right.
Yeah.
You're right, trustee. You're right, trustee Rosterling.
Okay.
So we open to convene the annual organizational meeting at that time. Then okay, so let's see, we have two traveling, trustee Martin, did you need something?
I'm trying to get logged in to
Oh,
whatever meeting
got
we're
it.
trying to get organized to,
All right.
and I know you got to sign in, and it's different.
All right, I just see people making all these hand gestures, so I was wondering if I was missing something here.
Get the person who went the
Keep going
furthest,
down.
which is Hoyt.
All right. Yeah, we have,
Yeah, okay, I thought I had
we
to
have
log in.
two wandering trustees who have now returned home, so
Join the
we will
meeting.
have trustee Hilsman go ahead and give the pledge.
I need to join the meeting because I'm in the public. Sorry about that.
Please stand, put your hands on your heart, and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So.
Thank
I clicked
you.
the author, okay.
Okay.
That's the, I just went right to public.
So at this time, we have introductions and recognitions. I believe we have a few people.
We have two certificates of appreciation, one for Carol Liu and one for Michael D. Antonovich. My understanding from Mr. Alex Buckle-Hyde is we do not have anybody from those two offices to accept the certificates of recognition, and we will be sending them those certificates of appreciation and recognition. And we also have with us today our auditors who will later on make a few brief remarks about the status of our audit at Pasadena City College. Thank you.
And I do see the former BOG chair is also out.
Right,
Jeff
Mr.
Baum.
Jeff
So
Baum is here.
do we have yellow sheets or speaker sheets?
Oh, yes. Yes. Can I just make a comment, if it's okay, about the legislators?
Sure.
They're probably not here because their offices have been disbanded. But I just, both of these people I work very closely with for many, many years, and they're just two outstanding representatives of the Pasadena area, of Pasadena City College. And we couldn't have been more blessed to have a state senator and a supervisor with their qualifications, and they're just wonderful. And thank you for doing that.
Yes, I do agree. Senator Liu has certainly been at the forefront of education, and
I'm going to interrupt again, and I apologize. I see item number 10 is our public comment on non-agenda items.
Yes. Because usually when we have a annual organizational meeting, the public comments happen after the reorganization.
That's all I was
But
trying
we
to
can,
point out. Yeah.
if the board so desires, and we do want Mr. Jeff Baum, who was president of this board in the past, to address the board and say a few words, that can be done at the request of the board if the board so desires.
so let's see, where is the reorganization of the agenda? I think we should just call for that. because
Selection of board officers,
That's,
number 4.
So where's the reorganization of the agenda?
That's all the way at, where is it? Convenience number 9.
That's number 9.
Number 9.
number
So,
9. And
this-
we're on number
Yeah.
We're
3.
right now on number 3.
Number 3.
So out of respect for Mr. Baum, who is here, let me ask the trustees if I can call for a reorganization of the agenda. So would anyone like to reorganize the agenda?
I'd propose that we give Jeff Baum the floor.
Right, let's do the introductions and for our special guests so that they don't have to wait through.
Actually, wouldn't have to be actually going out of the agenda because I did submit a comment card under item C4
But
on
yes,
the election of
then it would have been
officers.
way down here somewhere.
Yeah.
So-
So that it was, but Well, greetings. It's good to be back. My name's Jeffrey Baum. For the last 2 years, I've been president of the Board of Governors for the state of California's community college system, and for 12 years, I served alongside many of you on this board, including 2 terms as president. And I'm here to offer greetings on behalf of our incoming chancellor, Eloy Oakley. He's going to do a fantastic job as the leader of our statewide system, and he is a longtime fan and friend of President Verdeen. And I know that the state looks to PCC for continued leadership. But I'm really here to congratulate Trustee Wah on her leadership this past year as board president. We know we've benefited at the state level from her service on the workforce task force, and we've begun the implementation of that. And she played a critical role in guiding the findings that will improve workforce competitiveness in instruction across the state of California. And it's no secret or no accident, I believe, that PCC achieved among its highest recognition ever when it was named a top 10 finalist for the Aspen Prize, and hopefully, fingers crossed, to have that under her leadership. So I wanted to express on behalf of me personally, but also the state, congratulations for her year of service as president of the Board of Trustees. I'm probably speaking maybe in advance of the election, but I was going to also take the opportunity to congratulate the incoming officers. We've actually also wrestled with this. I just presided over the election at the Board of Governors where we've had contested elections, and it's always fine to have a contested election. But anticipating that Vice President Selvage will assume the presidency, and I'm probably getting ahead of myself, I wanted to congratulate him on his anticipated election, and also whoever is elected as Vice President and Clerk of the Board. I think that the state will look forward to working with the leadership at Pasadena City College, President Verdeen, the board leadership, and to Pasadena PCC is in good hands with this Board of Trustees, with this commitment to students and setting an example for the state. And I'm looking forward to continuing to have my personal trustee as a constituent of Trustee Selvage, seeing his leadership as president of the board. And then I don't know who will be in next as vice president or clerk, but also I wanted to extend that hand as well. So congratulations, thank you, Trustee Wah, and look forward to hearing the outcome of the vote, and then offering congratulations again. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Baum, and I want to thank you for your leadership in the BOG and for the BOG's support of the strong workforce initiatives. I think it's really going to change the dynamics of education and how we achieve the success for our students. So thank you so much for your leadership in the 2 years that you were the chair of the BOG. And we look forward to working with the incoming Chancellor Oakley. Okay, are there any others? Are there any other introductions and recognitions? All right. So at this time, we'll have the election of the board officers. We will open the nomination for the board chair. May I have... So, Trustee Brown.
Thank you, Trustee Wah. So I am very excited for tonight. And before I make my nomination, I want to say the reason why I'm nominating this individual to serve as president. As you know, we have 3 new board members, and we have a brand-new superintendent president, which has or is doing an outstanding job. One of the reasons why I would like to nominate this individual is only because we need to have someone that understands the role of the trustees and the role of the superintendent president. Right now, we're having some because the roles are not well defined. With a new president, we really want to ensure that he will get the support and we don't try to micromanage him. I have been on this board almost for 8 years, and the person that I'm nominating, I appreciate because they always put the college first, and they love Pasadena City College. And to me, that is very important for this next year as we move forward. So my nomination is for John Martin for the next president.
Okay, Mr. Martin, I assume you accept?
I want to nominate somebody else.
Okay. So if you nominate someone else, I assume that means you're not accepting?
Well, I've kind of said to the board, and I appreciate Trustee Brown immensely, and I'm really honored you said that. I have some personal work commitments right now that are extremely time-consuming, and I'm afraid I would do several different organizations. I wouldn't do them justice, including Pasadena City College, because, as we know, the board president does require quite a bit of additional time to do it properly. And so I've kind of asked my fellow trustees if they would respectfully ignore me on this board election. But I'm very grateful for what you said and the nomination, but I think it would be in the best interest of the college and several other people I'm working with at the moment if I might pass.
Okay. Do we have another nomination for the board president?
I would nominate Dr. Salvage.
Okay, we have a nomination for Dr. Selvage. Any other nominations? Okay, at this time, I guess, let's see, do we have the advisory vote on this? Okay, so the advisory vote, you can press your button.
He said we don't have to second.
Then all trustees.
We're doing this now.
Okay, so we have 6 yeses and 1 no. Okay, so at this time, we will open the, congratulations, Dr.
Thank you.
Selvage.
And turn off your light.
So at this time, we will open the nominations for the vice president. Trustee Selvage.
I would, oh, no, I wasn't asking for recognition. I'm trying to turn the light off.
Well, I'd like to nominate
have
you
any
if he's not-
nominations for-
No, I'm happy to nominate. If he can't get his light off, I'll get mine on.
Okay. Trustee
Yeah,
Trustee
okay.
Martin, I'm sorry.
I would be honored to nominate Dr. Fellow, who is our current clerk and obviously has served in the position before, and quite confident would do an exceptional job.
Okay, Trustee Fellow, I assume you accept?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Advisory vote? All trustees, press your button. Okay, unanimously accepted. Do we have a nomination for the board clerk?
I nominate Trustee Osterling.
Okay, I assume you accept, Trustee Osterling?
I'll assume if elected.
Okay,
serve.
I will serve.
are there any other nominations? Nominations are closed. Advisory vote? All trustees, please vote. Trustee Osterling, unanimously elected. Congratulations to you all. Okay,
Hardest job.
Thanks, Tony.
well, the board secretary is always Dr. Verdian, I think, so.
Has to be made official.
Okay, so is there a nomination for board secretary?
I nominate.
Let me see. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Okay,
Don't ask him whether he wants to do it or not.
You have no choice,
so
sir.
I guess advisory vote? All trustees, press your button. Yeah, and I do want to explain, I hope, Dr. Selvage, you don't take this personally. I did feel, Dr. Selvage missed a turn in the executive board, and I felt an extra year would have been good, but I certainly congratulate Dr. Selvage, and we've all worked very collegially together, and I expect that to continue. Okay, so at this time, why don't we change? And then you can,
Let me do it from this seat with the,
all right.
and all that.
Hang in my-
Okay.
Okay, the next order of business is certification of signatures.
have a list of with paperwork is right here for everybody to
Okay.
sign, starting with the board president, vice clerk, vice president, and so on. So we'll pass that around.
Okay, now, as we pass this around, can we move on to the next item, setting day and time? Okay. As the appropriate people sign the signature sheet here, we will move on to item number 6, setting day and time of regular meetings for 2017 and retreats.
So I move we approve the proposed dates.
I'll second
Can I
it.
say something, Amanda?
Dr. Verdian?
Yes, second.
Well, for discussion, Dr. Verdian?
You will notice that we have provided you in your packet, in this gray packet, the reason why we have a couple dates that have changed, because on the right-hand side, we have listed all the events that are taking place at the state level and the national level that will be attended by board members and college staff.
Okay.
Oh, that's in here?
Yes.
Yeah. Mr.
That's the, this document, this folder. Correct? Right. All right. Okay, is there a motion to approve
Yes.
the day and time?
I approve. I move approval.
Second.
Second by trustee Wah, I think. Okay, all in favor?
Well, Mr. President, if I may?
Oh, discussion.
Thank you. So I think it's well advised that we're kind of blocking out the first and third Wednesday of almost every month, with the exception of 4th of July and a few others. But I think as we experienced this last year, some of those regular meetings transitioned into study sessions on particular topics, and I found those very helpful. And so I just wanted to say to the president and the officers, I'm totally supportive of first and third Wednesdays. I, for one, would like to grant you my feelings of freedom to manipulate study sessions and special events and things on those dates, or even a cancellation, if we can line up the business on a single Wednesday instead of 2 Wednesdays, because I do know there's a tremendous amount of staff time that goes into preparing for these meetings, and if we were able to skip a meeting, that same staff time could be into very productive things for the students. So I just kind of wanted to state my opinion to the new board on and the new president as he works with the superintendent on that.
Yeah. Trustee Wah?
Yes, I do believe that we have a conflict in February. Most of us will be at the legislative conference for the ACCT on the third Wednesday of February. So I would recommend that we look at that as a change.
We have moved the third Wednesday in February, and if you look at the approved calendar, it's on the 4th Wednesday in February. We have the first Wednesday, February 1st, and then the 4th Wednesday, February 22nd, because of the legislative summit, which takes place on the 15th of February.
You're right, okay.
Right. And if you go on, I mean, it's the same thing in March as well. We have moved the third week of March to the 4th week, because the third week of March, we will be in Washington for the Aspen Award. That's when they will announce the winner. And then I do believe that these are the only 2 times during the year where we have moved the 3rd to the 4th. And as Trustee Martin was saying, in the past, we also used to include in that at random 2 retreats for the board, but this time we have not put that in here because we would like for the board to suggest the dates and the times that they would like for us to hold a retreat as we move along. I mean, it would be appropriate at the right time for the board to suggest that we do think that we need to have a retreat now or a study session, and then we will add these, or we will do what Trustee Martin just said, just change one regular business meeting into a study session or a retreat.
So,
Trustee Martin?
So this is a really good example. So when you have a 4th Wednesday and it's followed a week later by a 1st Wednesday, obviously, then that might be a place where one or the other would suffice to do all the business you need, and either there's a Wednesday off or a special retreat or something. So we'll let the new team work on that, but that's 2 good examples of what I was trying to articulate.
Yeah, the follow-up meeting would be ideal for a retreat where you could work on it ahead of time and then, have the material for that meeting. Are we waiting for a vote on this?
Yeah, I'll call the question.
Okay, no further discussion. Advisory vote?
Aye.
Everybody else? Passes
Oops, sorry. Wrong button.
unanimously.
We're already igniting controversy.
There we go. Okay, now, at this point, we are going to adjourn the annual organization meeting briefly, and we'll reconvene for the regular business meeting shortly.
Okay, what's next?
So do we have a break?
What do we do when we...
We have a motion to adjourn the annual organizational meeting, and then we'll reopen.
So I move to adjourn the annual meeting.
Oh. All in favor? Any discussion?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Advisory.
Advisory vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. Unanimously. Okay, the organizational, organizational meeting is adjourned. Yes. Okay. No, we're going to have some sort of a break, or do we just start?
No,
Okay.
just keep going.
Okay.
Forge ahead.
Okay, at this point, we will convene the regular business meeting for
And Rose Princesses.
December 14th, 2017, of the Board of Trustees of Pasadena Area Community College District. Approval and reordering of agenda items. Are there any?
We would
Dr. Vivian?
ask that we move items H4 and H5 as items 1 and 2 before we move on to the, in the action items. At H action, we would like to have H4 and H5 taken in first and second position because we do have guests that are here to address 4 and 5. The auditors are here for that.
You're just speaking of moving them within category H.
Within category H.
Within the action
yes,
items,
within
right.
category
Okay.
H. Right.
Okay, so the public comments on non-agenda items is next.
I had a question, though, on the agenda items before we do that. Item H1, I am moving that we table that for today and move that to a closed session item at our next meeting. And the reason I'm doing that is our primary information that we've received regarding this matter is an attorney-client privileged communication from our legal counsel on the various options, et cetera, and I do want to have the opportunity to discuss with the drafter of that attorney-client privileged document the various recommendations and details, and that should be done in a closed session. And I would just further comment, this item was tabled previously with the objective that we make sure that we get it taken care of in a January meeting, and we are on schedule ahead of that schedule.
Is there a second?
I think Dr. Vivian wants to comment.
Well, you've made a motion.
Yes, I move to table that item and move it to a closed session.
Okay, so we need to...
H1.
We need to know whether or not there's a second for that at this point. Okay, there being no second, that remains on the calendar as an action item. Okay.
Dr. Vivian wants to comment.
No, now that it is said,
It's no longer
What I
under
was
discussion.
going to ask that we confer with council to see if it is, if that can be taken into closed session. That's what I was going to say. Maybe we should check with council whether this is an item that can be discussed in closed session. I want to.
It's off the table, so we don't need that discussion.
Fantastic.
Okay, public comment on non-agenda items?
Okay, we do have a number of public comment on non-agenda items, and first, coming back to the podium, is Jeffrey Baum.
President Selvage, Vice President Fellow, members of the Board of Trustees. Again, I wanted to offer formal congratulations on the election of officers. I think the district's in great hands and look forward to working together to continue to advance the interests of PCC. The one thing that I had shared with Dr. Selvage in the past when he assumed the leadership of the trusteeship of our district, and what I call upon the rest of the trustees to continue, is to maintain your focus on student success and the metrics that define student success. We have gone back to the calendar, academic calendar that includes the winter session, and there are many benefits to students in that calendar, but I also hope that we continue, and we as a statewide effort will continue to monitor progress when it comes to persistence, the successful course completion, the passing of various courses, and the number of degrees and certificates awarded. And I do want to continue to urge this board, which has been very successful in the past and in the future, to see as we change the calendar and we also try to be innovative in other ways, that we're not losing focus and we're saying, what is the impact? Are more students passing their classes? Are more students graduating? Are they achieving their goals? Are we getting them through the system? PCC is such a model for the state, and I encourage you to continue that. But I know you're in good hands, and anything I know about Dr. Selvage, he's a guy who focuses on details and statistics and evidence, as well as other members of the board, and I'm looking forward to continuing to celebrate the achievements of PCC and of both the students and the faculty and the entire community in the year ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baum, and I apologize for the distraction up here. My charger was malfunctioning, so our tech people have remedied that. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Martin Enriquez.
Good evening, honorable trustees and assembled persons. I'm going to read, 25 years ago at the Circadian, I handed the opinion of the Attorney General of the State of California. It's number 91-403. I'm going to read some of the conclusions. Conclusion 1. Under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, the creation of a, quote, majority minority, unquote, district in a redistricting plan for the purposes of preventing minority vote dilution takes precedence over all other criteria used to draw district boundaries except for the one person, one vote requirement. Conclusion 2. If a district can be created with a racial minority population high enough to guarantee an election of a candidate of a racial minority community's choosing, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act generally requires the creation of such a district in a redistricting plan. Conclusion 3. Depending on the totality of circumstances, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and the California Constitution generally requires that a geographically compact racial minority communities of interest not be divided in a redistricting plan. Conclusion 4. Under the standard articulated in Davis versus Bannister, 478 U.S. 109, a redistricting plan will be invalidated pursuant to a constitutional equal protection guarantees on the grounds of political, gerrymandering only if the plan is intentionally discriminatory and imposes an actual discriminatory effect. Conclusion 5, the California Constitution imposes the requirements or limitations on the drawing of district boundaries in addition to those of the federal government to the extent of requiring timely adjustment of districts, single-member districts, continuity of districts, consecutive numbering of districts from north to south, and the geographic integrity of cities and counties and geographical regions to the extent possible. That includes elementary attendance areas within Pasadena Unified School District.
30-second warning. Keep going.
Congratulations to all of you. I'm glad there was a vigorous discussion of the First Amendment, and I did offer a modest suggestion as to H1. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is David McCabe.
Good evening, Dr. Verdian and President Selvage and Vice President Fellows and members of the board. This holiday season is an especially joyous one for me. After being gone for 9 months on medical leave and undergoing a life-changing surgery and a terrifying cancer scare, I'm happy to be healthy, and I'm happy to be in the service of students once again as a coordinator of teacher preparation program. And Jeff, seems like yesterday you and I were up in Sacramento receiving the transfer program award. That was a great honor, and I was happy to be a part of that. On your desk in front of you, you'll find a card highlighting some of the adventures that our teacher prep students have participated in this fall. In addition to sponsoring the Personal Pathways to Teaching Symposium in November, which attracted over 200 student participants and featured a video welcome from Washington, D.C., given to us by former high school teacher and current Congressman Mark Takano, we were able to assist Gwendolyn McMullins, who's the president of the California Retired Teachers Association, in giving out 2 $500 scholarships to 2 of our teacher prep students who transferred to Cal State LA this fall. Additionally, I've joined our students on educational field trips. Our first was a visit to Huntington Gardens to the Becoming of America exhibit to help our future teachers appreciate American ingenuity and the importance of arts in our curriculum. A group of us also traveled to Orange County to help young children appreciate the science behind sports, and we finished up by attending Santa Ana City College's 20th annual Road to Teaching Conference, where our students participated in workshops and topics ranging from robotics to music, and my students were shocked to learn in the Music and Literacy Forum that I lack rhythm. Additionally, I'm working to get the word out to our students about education and child development classes that we're offering during winter session. You may have noticed some of the flyers that have been spread throughout campus. I'm trying to convince students that taking courses during winter is more fun than snowboarding, and hopefully I'm successful. And Dr. Verdian, I unfortunately did not have the pleasure of formally making your acquaintance when you assumed the position of president. I was on my way out due to medical leave, and I hope to correct that really soon. But what you may not know about me is I'm an avid outdoorsman and hiker, and I found much peace and insight during my sojourns with nature. And I have a gift I'd like to give you tonight. I hope you enjoy a hand-polished walking staff that I took from a saguaro cactus on my trips to Sedona.
30-second warning.
Oh, okay. And I hope that you can draw some inspiration from it as you lead Pasadena City College on our pathway to discovery and student success. And on a side note, Ed 30 this winter, we're going to be exploring multiple intelligences, and we're taking a hiking field trip to Sturtevant Falls up in the San Gabriels. If you want to take your walking stick and join us, I would love to have you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Thank you, Mr. McCabe. And welcome back, and we appreciate everything you're doing here for us. I'm familiar with Sedona. I lived there at one time.
Our next speaker is Patty Dorange Martin.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Dr. Verdian. I'm here tonight because I would like to announce, and many of you already know, that we have finally moved out of the Veterans Resource Center. We're in a temporary space, and we are very, very excited, awaiting our transformation and expansion in our new space. And also to announce that for the fourth year in a row, Military Times has rated us as best for vets for two-year colleges, number 1 in California, and we've moved up the ladder nationwide from 7 to number 5. So I'm very excited about that. And we were extremely excited to have Dr. Verdian at our SOS breakfast during Veterans Day week activities that we had. He was able to hear some rather unbelievable, silly questions that our veterans are asked. He was a bit shocked, I think. So he learned a little bit of what some of our veterans go through. But anyways, I wanted to come tonight. I wanted to thank the board. I wanted to thank Linda Waugh especially for her unwavering support. This has been 3 years in the making, and we're just very excited that it's finally happening, and we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're looking forward to many more veteran success workshops and activities to help our veterans move forward. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Ms. Durange Martin. We are delighted that we've received the recognition again, number 1 in California and now 5 in the U.S. Military Times. Thank you.
And I would just like to thank Patty and all of and Carol and all of the veterans. I think you guys have just done a yeoman's task over there, and we're really looking forward to you having an open house. And yeah, I think that we're all in this pulling our oars in the water to make sure that there's success for our veterans. So thank you.
That concludes the public comment on items not on the agenda. Approval of minutes for business meeting number 21, November 2, 2016.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Rest of the trustees? Minutes are approved unanimously. Item number 12, approval of minutes, study session number 22, November 30th, 2016. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? We have one abstention.
I was not present, so I can't vote on this one.
Thank you. Okay. Item D on the agenda, consent items, students. We have 6 items on this part of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Passes unanimously. Item number E, consent items, instruction. We have 5. Do I have a motion?
Mr. President, I'm going to be so bold as to move approval of E, F, and G, because all of those are consent items.
Second that motion.
all that.
G has to be approved separately because it's a personal item and the student trustee does not have an advisory vote on that one.
I will move approval of E and F.
Okay, so the motion is to consolidate F and G.
E and F.
E and F.
Or, excuse me, E and F. Okay, with the exception of which item?
No, just E and F, and we'll vote on G, which is
Oh,
personnel
okay.
separately.
Fine, if there's no objection, we have a motion to approve items E and F on the consent calendar?
And we do need a trustee advisory vote on that one.
Yeah, advisory vote?
Aye.
All the rest of trustees? Passes unanimously, I believe. Trustee Fellow?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. consent items G and, which one is it now that the,
G is the personnel, so that's the only one that...
oh, she doesn't vote on any of them?
Right, right.
Oh, okay. Okay, do we have a motion for consent item G?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor? Passes unanimously. Moving on to item H. Now, here we are going to have item H4 and H5 moved up to the front of this section. H4 is receipt of fiscal year 2015-16 district financial audit. H5 is receipt of fiscal year 2015-16 PCC Foundation financial audit. Do we have to vote on those separately?
Separately.
Okay, but we're going to discuss them, we're going to have a presentation
Yes,
of the
we
two of them
will,
combined.
We will have the auditors share with us their findings of the audit. Renee?
Thank you very much. See if I can scoot this over a little bit and not break it. Thank you, Jesse. And actually, Jessie Wang is here with me this evening, too. She's the manager on the engagement, so she's going to help in the presentation and also with any questions that you might have for us. The audit process itself, it's a long process, which your management team can attest to. The audit starts in about April, and we did meet with the Budget and Audit Committee meeting back in April and presented our audit approach and our audit plan to them. And then that was also followed up in November. We again met with the Budget and Audit Committee and went through the draft of the report. And I want to say that that meeting was close to about a 3-hour meeting. So we did go through the report in quite a bit of detail. And as always, they do ask really good questions at that meeting. So tonight what our plan is to present highlights of the report and then be available for any questions that you may have. So the opinion on the district audit report is a clean or an unmodified opinion. That is the highest type of opinion that we can render on the financial statements. And what that means is that they are fairly presented and following all the appropriate governmental accounting policies. Following the opinion is management's discussion and analysis, and that is required to be in the audit report. And management does a really good job writing that document. So hopefully you've had a chance to read it. Hopefully that will answer some questions that you may have. It's their opportunity to kind of write a story about what the numbers and what the footnotes are telling the readers of your financial statements. In regard to the financial statements themselves, the net position increased during the 2015-16 fiscal year. A large part of that was some one-time state-mandated monies that were received from the state of California, and it was about $12 to $13 million. So that definitely did help the financial position of the college. Let's see. There was additional activity related to GASB 68 this year that, being the second year of implementation, there was new information that came through on the actuarial reports, and so that's reflected in your financial statements as well. Another big thing that happened during the year is that there was a bond refunding. So that is presented in your financial statements, and I'm sure that you know this, but I'll go ahead and reiterate it, is doing that bond refinancing will save the taxpayers about $7 million. That was a very positive refinancing that occurred, and that is all fully disclosed in the notes to the financials as well. There were a number of new, actually there were 2 new GASB standards that were implemented during this fiscal year. They had mostly to do with disclosures related to cash and investments. And there's also a footnote about additional upcoming new GASB standards that will be implemented. Some of them will be effective in 16-17, and then some will be effective in future years. A lot of them are again related to the pension accounting. We kind of refer to it as cleanup legislation, if you will. They implemented the standard, and as governmental entities have been implementing it and finding that the standard isn't working as intended, then additional standards have come out with different revisions. So those, you'll see that happening over the next couple of years. Toward the end of the report, there are 3 series of letters. They deal with internal controls and also compliance. We had no findings in this year's audit report, so all three of those letters, you'll see that it states that there are no internal control weaknesses that were identified in the audit, and also no issues of noncompliance. In the previous audit, there were 4 findings, and all of those findings were fully implemented during the year. So there's comments that each of those have been implemented. Let's see. So those were the highlights of the district audit that we wanted to mention. I believe you also have the Measure P bond audit report in your packet as well, and that has also received an unmodified opinion. There's 2 audits in the one bound document, so there's both a financial audit and then a performance audit. And our main purpose on the performance audit is looking at more qualitative type issues. So we're looking at what is in the education code and making sure that there's full compliance with that. So we look at the makeup of the oversight committee, make sure all the required constituents are on that committee. We look at the website, make sure that that's up to date, and there's an annual report issued. And then, of course, in both the financial and performance audit, our main goal of those audits is looking at the expenditures and ensuring that the expenditures are on voter-approved projects. So within that report, again, it's a clean opinion, and we have no findings in the Measure P audit. So I don't know if I should stop there or go ahead and go on to the foundation, or if we want to handle the district and the Measure P audit.
Dr. Verdian, will the staff be making some comments at this point?
Dr. Stoughty, is there anything you'd like to add?
There's really nothing to add. I mean, we're very pleased with the audit results. It's a clean audit report with no findings, as Renee mentioned.
Well, I've got a few comments, and Trustee Osterly and Trustee Martin might want to add a few things. We were on the Budget Audit Committee and went through these meetings. We are a $150, $160 million a year operation. When you look at our general fund, we're a couple $100 million a year operation when you throw everything in that we deal with. And it's very, very gratifying to have an unmodified audit with no findings, and it's a testament to the work of the fiscal staff and budget staff here at the college, and we thank the auditors. 2 things. The audit this year is the second year in which we identify the unfunded liability for the, the pension liabilities. And this is an item of concern, and it's not something that we can deal with in just 1 year. It's something that we need to plan for over the intermediate and the long term as we go through budgeting and take other measures at the college to make sure that at the end of the day we can write checks to cover our expenses. So the committee and the staff is working hard and very conscious of those requirements. Again, congratulations to the staff on the clean audit. It's all you can ask for. Mr. Osterly, Mr. Martin, any?
I'll just make a couple quick comments. Just for the fellow board members, we did have an executive session without the superintendent or any staff present, where just the board committee and the auditors met, and a very nice discussion. And I can pleased to say that there was a favorable result from that and the discussions. We're not going to go into any detail, but all the comments were very, very positive. And as Dr. Selvage said, I've been on the board a long time, and I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen an audit without a finding. That's, for a $200 million operation, that's a big deal. That's really an accomplishment. And there's a page 68 in the book where the federal government asks you to answer all these questions, yes or no, and every question was answered on that page, and it's a little hard to tell sometimes if yes or no is the right answer, is a good answer or not, based on the way they word the question. But every question was answered in the way favorable to Pasadena City College and the district course, especially that it's a low-risk audit. In an institution of this size, to qualify as a low-risk audit without a single finding is just exceptional. It's just really exceptional. So I kind of want to make a big deal to the finance people, the whole team, and I know we've gone through the banner transition and a lot of uphills in the last few years, but this is just a really solid. Even when we weren't going through those transitions, we've never seen something this clean. So strong accommodations to all of you for that great job.
Have Dr. Verde in just a moment, but yes, Trustee Martin has 24 more years, or 34 more years of experience dealing with audits here at BCC than I do, and it's quite a testament. Dr. Verde?
Well, in addition to the work of Dr. Story, I want to recognize especially Mr. Jose Monetti, Ms. Lacania Fenesi, and Hedva Weingart for the work that they have done to put this audit together and to answer all the questions that the auditors had. And I just want to thank them, just to show you the type of, and Diane Mandrafina is not with us anymore, she's at a different school, but her work needs to be recognized as well. And I am very happy that you recognize the hard work that our staff have done to make this audit as it is.
Trustee Osterling.
I would echo everything that's been said already and not repeat it. And I would confirm, as the auditors reported, that the Audit and Budget Committee, which is a hands-on group, did grill the auditors and the staff for 3 hours, as reported. One thing that's interesting about a community college audit compared to an audit that you might see of a corporation is not only are the auditors required to opine on the financial statements for the institution, but they're also required to audit that we're in compliance with all the different fundings that we receive from the federal and state. And as Trustee Martin previously reported, that came back as a clean opinion. So again, kudos to the staff for that. Thank you.
All right, let's see, this is an action item. This is to receive, not approve, but to receive the audit for the college for fiscal year 2015, 2016. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Motion passes unanimously to accept the audit. Next is the receipt of the fiscal year 2015-16 for PCC Foundation.
All right, and I was really excited to see them all go green up there, so that was good. Yes, so the foundation audit is here as well, and the foundation audit goes through a very similar process. They, as you know, have their own audit committee, their own board, and so we meet with those individuals as well as with Bobby, who gives her approval on the report. So we have gone through that process with their oversight organization as well. But the report is here, and it is, again, a clean, unmodified opinion. The standards that the foundation follows are different than what the college follows. You're under GASB requirements. The foundation is a not-for-profit entity, follows FASB requirements, so some of the presentation is a little bit different, some of the footnotes are a little bit different since there are different requirements. But the financial statements that have been presented comply with all of those standards. They too increased over the year as far as the net position. Total grant revenues were in excess of what they were in the previous year, and the expenditures were a little bit lower, so that definitely helped add to their ending balance as well. And similarly in this report, you wouldn't see the findings in the report itself, so you don't have a page in here similar to what you have in your district report, which says findings and then states that there were no findings. With this type of an entity, if we did have any management comments or any internal control weaknesses, there would be a separate management letter that is issued. But again, we did not have any internal control findings, so there is not a separate management letter that was issued to the foundation's board of directors. So again, kind of a high-level summary of the audit report, and we'll just open it up to see if you have any questions on this.
Dr. Verdian, do we have any comment or anything for the staff to add?
Well, I would like to ask Bobby, if you have anything to add, Bobby Abram, the Executive Director of the Foundation?
I really don't have any comments, except that this is the first time the foundation has exceeded $27 million in assets. So this is the highest we've ever had in assets, and we're very, very pleased. We thought the audit was done very nicely. We have an audit committee that's well-versed and has worked with this particular firm for 3 years now, so we feel very comfortable with it. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you very much. I would just make the observation that we're very gratified that we have a clean audit for the foundation as well, and congratulations on hitting another milestone on your assets. Thank you.
And then I'd just like to make a comment as the liaison from the board to the PCC Foundation. I want to congratulate them on an event that we had last night. I think I'm jet lagged, but I think it was last night. And also the beginning of a capital campaign, which I think is going to be a very successful piece of work to support the college. So congratulations to Bobby and the whole foundation on this.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve to accept
I make a
the
motion to accept the report.
audit for the
I'll
foundation?
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Passes unanimously. We will now,
Thank you.
oh, Dr. Verdian.
No, so we're good, item number one.
Oh, yes, correct, yes, yeah. We
We're
will
gonna
now,
Thank the auditors for all your hard work,
Thank you.
because that's a lot of hard work.
Appreciate it. Thank you for moving
Yeah.
this up in the agenda.
Thank you.
Very much.
okay, we will now address item H1, resolution for consolidation of future board trustee elections with the statewide election pursuant to Elections Code, Section 1302B and 2, resolution adopting a plan to consolidate future board of trustee elections with statewide election pursuant to Election Code, Section 14052B. Dr. Verdian, we have first
We have Mr. Warren Kinsler, legal counsel, who will explain the whole process to us and will give us additional information that was requested by the Board of Trustees in November.
Thank you, President Selvage, members of the board, Dr. Verdian. As the board remembers, you asked us to prepare a pros and cons document with respect to June versus November. I've got a brief presentation here. I've got a couple of slides. I know, if I remember correctly, we had one member absent at the last meeting, and just by way of catch-up there, SB 415 requires you to change election dates from, in this case, November of odd-numbered years to a date on which, to a date that coincides with a statewide election, either the statewide direct primary in June of even-numbered years or the statewide general election in November of even-numbered years. If you take the average of your voter turnout in the district at the last 4 general elections and compare that to one of your elections, and as many of you will recall, we provided this analysis from our demographer. The threshold was 35% at worst, or at best, depending on how you look at it, and compared to your most recent elections, you did not reach the threshold, so at some point in the near future, you're going to need to make a decision about changing to an even-numbered year election. And you can see that no matter which of the thresholds you look at, and just by background, you may recall that the legislature didn't give us the clearest language with respect to how that comparison was to be determined. But if you take it any of the two ways that we can see how to read it, you have either a 35% threshold or a higher 45% threshold, and you're not going to approach either of those. But in terms of considering November versus June, we looked at the question of voter turnout, some questions in terms of uncertainty about whether the legislature actually intends for community college districts to be able to conduct elections in June, uncertainty about commencement and expiration of terms. We looked at ballot roll-off, voter fatigue, and demographic differences between primary and general electorates. And the very legal conclusion that we reach from all of this is that these various factors cut several different ways at the same time, and if one factor can be both regarded as advantageous and disadvantageous at the same time. Here's your comparison to the comparison of primary and general election turnout for precincts comprising the Pasadena Area Community College District, and also providing some statewide numbers. The obvious conclusion there, if you look, for example, just at the average, your turnout at the June elections is 25% as compared to the November general election, up around 60%, and those percentages are a few points below the statewide averages. If you look in the education code, it talks about schools and community college districts conducting their elections in November of odd-numbered years, and that terms begin and end on the first Friday in December of those odd-numbered years. And the legislature has not provided corresponding dates for the June election for community college districts. Interestingly, they haven't provided a corresponding set of dates or days for elections that might occur in November of even-numbered years either, although it would fit very nicely by analogy if we looked at Ed Code sections 5000 and 5017, which relate to the odd-numbered year elections. In other words, you could use the same beginning and end dates for terms there. We've had conversations with the LA County Registrar Recorder's Office, and they have chosen their words carefully for us and indicated that they believe that the November date is a better fit for school and college districts than the June date. So we also, as I indicated, we looked at voter roll-off, voter fatigue. I think if we view these phrases as, if we view them loosely, we're probably better off. Voter fatigue may be the more encompassing term. Voter roll-off relates to the inclination of voters as they actually move through a ballot to stop voting on down-ballot matters. And it results, obviously, in fewer votes being cast. On the other hand, if you have fewer issues on the ballot, you may become less fatigued with it, and that might weigh in favor of greater consideration for those agencies or individuals that are further down the ballot.
So can I just interrupt 1 second? So the voter roll-off effect is less in June than in November?
That's the theory, and as we'll see in a moment, we don't really see in voter behavior that the June elections get much more voter turnout. Well, their voter turnout is obviously much lower still than the general election. So it seems to be that it's a less significant effect. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, thank you.
Let me play that back slow. Voter fatigue is less on the June ballot than on the November ballot. Is
That would be
what
the-
you said in a few more words?
That would be the theory, that there is less to think about. We're also faced with a statutory interpretation problem, and this is one of the factors that militates in favor of our recommendation for November, is that the Elections Code section that talks about community college governing board election consolidation references only the statewide general election. And that raises the question, was this an omission, was the omission of reference to June or some other reference that would have included the June an oversight, or was it intentional? And while I suspect that it is oversight, the court decisions would require that, or would not permit me as an attorney to really rest on my belief that it's an oversight. Otherwise, we would make the process of construing legislation more of a game of roulette if we're trying to guess at what the legislature intended or didn't intend here, as opposed to just looking at the plain language.
Warren, quick question on that. So if this omission or oversight hadn't taken place, what would the language state? What's missing from this language?
Any reference to that would include the June election that you see, for example, in the K through 12 consolidation statute. This section,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just looking at this, and I don't see any reference to the November date either, so I'm not sure.
Well, the
what I'm
November
missing.
date is the reference there to the statewide general election.
Got it.
That
Understood.
occurs only in November of even-numbered years.
Understood. Thank you.
So the consequence of this would be possibly that a June election would be invalidated.
That's the possibility. Of course, it seems that with SB 415, the legislature certainly seemed to contemplate the potential of a June election for school and college jurisdictions.
Okay. To follow up on that comment, the California Voter Participation Act provides for any jurisdiction that needs to adjust its election cycle to select either a June or a November, because it says it can do either. Because it only specifies a statewide, which includes primary and general elections.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's a more recent law.
I'm sorry?
That's a more recent law being, this past year.
And while it's more recent law, true, the other side of that coin is 10,405.9, .7 rather, would be regarded arguably as the more specific statute.
Yeah, it's on point.
So you got different inferences that can be drawn from different aspects of it. This section, as I pointed out before, used to be in the Education Code, and they repealed the old Education Code and moved it into the Elections Code. So they've been dealing with it, and they could have fixed that, you'd think, if that's what they had intended. So there are arguments on both sides of it, is what I'm telling you, that there's a certain amount of uncertainty involved in all of this. So voter fatigue is the phrase that more of us have heard about as we've gone through very long ballots over the years. In 2011, I believe it was, the legislature determined that the initiative and referendum process would be held at the statewide general election and not at any other election. And so as a result, we saw, I've lost count, Props 51 through 67 on our ballots in November. And there was plenty of discussion about what effect that was having on voters. The statewide numbers in final form aren't available, but I believe it's back at about 70. The statewide turnout, I think, was 72 or 3 point, something like that, which is an expected number, or not a surprising number. There are differences in those who vote in the June and November election in terms of demographics. You tend to get an older, more conservative turnout in June, a more liberal and broader participation in the November election. So that kind of takes us through it in a quick nutshell. I'm happy to try and answer any of your questions.
Questions?
Yes. I think a threshold question that's come up, and I think it came up in the last meeting, is this issue of safe harbor and putting off till, is it 2022 would be the date?
Right. The safe harbor provision provides that if you adopt a plan by January 1st of 2018, you can put off your election until the November 2022 election. In looking at legislative history while doing this, it may very well be the case that the intention there in the delay was really the legislature taking into account information provided from LA County, which was they weren't certain whether they could have their election equipment up to speed to handle everybody that they would need to sooner than that date. And so sort of the takeaway there is that there is at least some implication in 415 that the legislature intent was that you change sooner rather than later, but there's certainly that door left open to us to take advantage of a safe harbor.
So to follow on that, one of my concerns would be if we did that and delayed, what would be the additional cost to the district? In other words, we just had an election that were 2 districts in Pasadena. Do we have an idea of what those costs are? And that's what we would have to foot the bill for.
I believe Dr. Verdi and staff has made that inquiry.
Yes, Dr. Verdi?
We do have that information. Dr. Storti, would you share with the board how much that would cost us if we were to run those elections?
Absolutely. We've worked with the LA County, the Registrar's Office, and the cost differential is about $350,000
Per?
for each election, and that's assuming 4 seats up per election. So if we had an election at the same time as an even year, during the statewide general election or the June election, the primary, compared to an odd year. The odd year would have a cost $350,000 more than the even year election.
So if we're going to 2022, we're talking about 3 election cycles then, right? So 1 million,
It would be
Five-
about 1.7 million because it's 350,000 per year, and you're looking at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So that's 5 years. So that will be 1,000,
1.7 million.
1.7.
All right, I just wanted to establish,
17 can't change anyway, though, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
There is time.
17 can
There
change.
is time to change
Yes.
17.
Okay.
all right.
Is it per year or per election? It'd be every 2 years, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
It's
per
not
election.
every year, it'd be every 2 years.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's 3 election
It
cycles.
will be 3 lakhs.
So $1,050,000,
About $1 million.
about $1 million bucks.
And
Okay.
that's the differential between,
That's the
how was that, you gave us the conclusion, how was that conclusion arrived at? Because you would have to compare,
Yeah, according to the Registrar's Office, if we had an election during an odd year, the cost for an election with 4 seats is $622,000.
Okay.
If it's an even year election, it's about $270,000. So the difference is $350,000.
and that second number is, the first number is based on actual elections that we've had, and the second one would be some type of a projection by
It's a
them.
projection. And the reason why it's lower is because there's more agencies going out for elections, so they split the cost. The costs are allocated out.
Do you have an idea of the differential between the June and the November costs for the district?
The Registrar's Office provided that, and it was only a $2,000 difference, so it's basically the same.
Okay.
I've made a timeline to try and understand this, for my own purposes. There are 2 points at which it would be logical for us to make a decision to do the shift. One would be to add a year to the term of everybody sitting up here at the dais and shift in our next election cycle. We would satisfy the law if we waited, if we would satisfy, that's number 1, that's option number 1. Option number 2 would be if we all complete our 4-year term, and for the next term, one time, it would be an election for a 5-year term. That would synchronize us with the state elections, statewide elections, so that in 2022 and thereafter, after I hit my microphone, in 2022 and thereafter, we would be in sync with the statewide
But
elections.
that doesn't address the cost problem, am I correct?
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
The number of elections is 2.
So it would be...
2 elections is the difference.
700,000 versus...
Correct.
1 point, yeah.
No, it'd be 700,000 more.
Right, rather than
Period.
1 million...
It's not 1 million anything, it's 2 elections, if we...
Under
do
that
the shift.
option, yeah.
Correct, yes. So if you want to know the number, the dollar figure, that's what it is,
So,
on the basis that the 300 and something is correct from the registrar.
so I also see that those are, I think, are our 2 most viable options also. I'm not in favor of trying to drag this out and making it longer, because I think that really defeats the purpose of the CVPA and getting more voter participation. So I think that should be, our objective is to comply with the law, and I think that we all want to encourage increased voter participation. I guess my question is, what is your experience, I know how my areas have already voted, and all of them have voted to add the extra year and then start their elections in 2018, then again in 2020. But in general, what is your experience, Warren, and then is there any pros and cons of doing that? I kind of have a feeling of pros and cons, but I'd like to hear your assessment.
Our experience has been very uniform, that districts are going to the November date. I think, putting aside all of the analysis that we've provided here, they're simply seeing that as the place where they will have the most attention, largest turnout.
But I mean, are they choosing the option of adding the year to the incumbents or else running for a 5-year term in the current odd year?
One of the things that you ought not feel in all of this is that you are somehow sneaking yourselves into an additional year in office. If you make the change in the election date, you remain in office until your successors qualify, in which case, if you go to November, it does extend the term by a year. If you went to June, it would extend it only by 6 months, but that wouldn't be your decision in the sense that that's going to happen as a matter of law, as you do the consolidation.
Yeah, to put that another way, the law anticipates that in order to synchronize an odd year election cycle with an even year election cycle, either current elected officials will get an extension, and it might not be a year, or the next cycle will have to be an election in which there is an extra year added.
Right, so that's,
Those are the
so
two.
I got
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So I'm not talking about a June, November. To me, I think, I think that you've demonstrated that there is greater participation during November. So for me, that should be our objective, is to increase the voter participation, regardless of voter fatigue. I mean, we had, 20-something propositions on this last thing, and yeah, it was a pain to go through it, but people got through it. So my question is really that I think the option is to add the year to the current. So as Trustee Selvage pointed out, it's like giving yourself an extra year, but it's not quite an extra year, and then it gets everyone ready for the 2018 cycle, versus running in 2017 now, and you would run for a 5-year. Is that right? A 5-year term?
That's the other option when you
Right,
are
that's what I'm asking.
when you're looking at in what year will you sync up. It doesn't address the June or November.
Right. For me, I already am clear. To me, I think that the June, November, to me, seems like the November is CVPA, more CVPA, I guess, complies or has a greater turnout in November. So I'm asking about the two
Let me
options.
try and answer that question this way. If you were to not make a decision to change now and went ahead and held your 2017 election, those members elected at that election would have terms of 4 years. But then suppose in 2018, after people are seated, they decide, okay, now we want to switch. Well, it has the same effect, so that individuals on the board would get still, if they went to November, an additional year on the board.
Can I make a comment as well? Back on the cost, which is disturbing to me, I know I'm wondering what we're getting if for our $700,000 or our $1 million here, what's the bang for the buck by postponing it? Because I know there's been discussion about that, but I'm not sure that it's a great benefit to the college that's worth the $700 or $1 million. It may benefit us individually as elected officials, but I just don't see how the delay really benefits the college.
Well, I haven't heard anybody argue for that yet. It's merely been identified as one of the... Excuse me.
Yeah.
As one of the two options, and we've identified what the cost would be if we go with the delay. It would be a benefit for all of us who are here now, existing office holders, because we get a 1-year extension. I'm just identifying the options.
I see what you're...
Well, and I also want to point out, I think in your letter, you point out, whether or not there is, about the uncertainty and the effect of syncing with Pasadena City Council, but we have more than Pasadena City Council that we're syncing with. So, for example, different, I think, what do we have? 11 other municipalities in our district that we would be syncing with. So that's why I was asking if you knew what the, some of those districts and municipalities have already voted and for their new schedule.
We are working with another district, a unified school district, that is wholly within your territory.
Can you
Not-
identify it?
I'm sorry?
Can you identify it?
I'd prefer not to.
Okay.
In terms of the municipalities, I've really not, I don't practice in that area, so they haven't been coming to me on that question. They have those that are charter cities are going to have some issues that they're going to want to struggle with. But I suspect they will find that they have to make similar decisions to that which you are facing going forward.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could make a motion to...
We've got some more questions on the...
It's an information
Point of
only
order, I
item.
can make a motion.
Well,
Isn't it?
I believe I can make a motion at any point.
Oh, it is an action? Sorry.
So my motion would be, and we can discuss it, obviously. My motion would be to adopt the resolution to put in force as soon as possible the November election date.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion.
May I make a suggestion to the author of the
Yeah,
the
please,
motion?
please,
Which would be, the motion would simply be to adopt the resolution calling for consolidation with the November statewide general election.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
I'm unclear on what we're going to be voting on. At the end of the day, there's two things that we need to decide, and I'm unclear what we're doing.
So I assume you're referring to whether there's a June or November date, or whether there's whether we do it now or whether we postpone it.
Correct.
My motion would have a November date that we would begin in a timely fashion. So we should discuss the options, obviously.
That's covered in one of the two draft resolution sets
Right.
in the agenda package.
And the other element would be the adoption of the safe harbor resolution, which puts in place the plan in case, for some reason, the county board were not to approve your consolidation. You can take that up separately.
Is there further discussion?
Well, you go ahead first.
Okay. Having just run for election myself, most recently Hoyt and myself, I'll offer the observation that clearly we need to do something and get on the statewide cycle. Having said that, although it cost the district a lot of money, what happens in these low turnout elections is the people that show up to vote, and everybody that's registered to vote is entitled to vote. It's their decision whether they elect to use that privilege or not. The people that show up to vote actually know who's running and know who the issues are, and care about this, and in either the June or the November cycle, as much as we all would like to think how important we are going to be way down ballot, and people are going to have a very hard time knowing who these different people are. We're going to be more obscure than the judgeships that get voted on. And the practical implication of that, of us being in a general election, be it June or November, is that pause to consider that the cost to the candidate to run for election will literally triple, quadruple, or quintuple, and the amount that I had to spend to get elected was shockingly high to me. And what will happen as a practical matter is it's going to be very unappealing for people to take on that financial burden to run for these seats. I joked when I was on the campaign trail that my first official act of business was I was going to file a minimum wage claim because of the amount of work that a trustee takes on and the low pay. We do it for the benefit of the community, and I'm very concerned under either one of these options. I understand we have to do this. I'm very concerned under either one of these options that we understand how much it's really going to cost a candidate. We're going to have to reach out to a lot more voters. That's fine. There's more voter participation. And we're going to be buried in a sea of ads for all the other positions and so on and so forth. That's a long way of me suggesting that of the two choices of June versus November will be a little bit less down ballot and a little bit less obscure, and we might only have to spend 3 or 4 times what we used to have to spend instead of 5 or 8 or 10. And it will get frightfully unattainable. So I would suggest, and not just for the benefit of the 7 elected trustees here, but also for the benefit of all of those who are to come to sit in this seat, that the more expensive and unattainable we make this, the more difficult that we will have finding good quality people that are willing to undertake this important but low-paying task. So I would advocate to all of the trustees here that we consider the June primary date as opposed to the November general election date.
Mr. Salvage?
Yes, Dr.
I
Feldman.
just wanted to clarify something that Jim just talked about. I've been under this, when I was a city councilman, we added a year on. It was 10 years ago, for some reason, some new law. But when you're talking about the cost of campaigns, the registration fees shouldn't be affected, should they?
Correct. I'm referring
Candidate to file.
to the cost of the campaign.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Trustee Martin?
So, I agree with Trustee Osterling, and I'm just going to flat out say, and I know we have to obey the law, but I don't believe it's good governance. I think it's a mistake to believe that the turnout has anything to do with, has a correlation to people voting on our particular down ballot. And whether you call it fatigue or no matter what you call it, there won't be the media presence and time in the Star News that when the local elections have been focused only on the local elections, they get more coverage, there's more debate, there's more understanding by more people of the candidates and the issues, and all of that is going to get washed under the ocean of propositions and obviously important congressional seats and ballots. So I'm very actually disheartened by the whole process. So in the lesser, I would say this. I would say if I was an elementary person, a principal in an elementary school, which I at one time was, it's playing Where's Waldo with a very serious issue, because it's going to be where's Waldo when it comes to what are you running for, and you're on the ballot where, and what's that about? But to put it in community college terms, it's like you're taking 4 classes and they assigned all your finals on the same day. That's what we're doing to voters, and we expect them to go in there and get an A in every one of those subjects because they had time to research them and do it right. And
But it'll be about 20 classes, not 4.
So, I think you can relate to what that issue means. And I know this last election, just on the propositions, how much time I spent carefully reviewing my Star News, going online, reading different sources, and how many people basically came to me saying, John, I don't have a clue what this is all about. How are you voting, by the way? And just more or less carte blanche took my recommendations that I voted for, borrowed my sample ballot and voted for it. And quite honestly, that is not the best government. The best government is when people are researching these things themselves, where there is a debate, where there is time for the Star News to cover Pasadena City College or the local elections. So between the lesser of two evils, I would rather not compete with all the state propositions that happened in November. You did a masterful job as an attorney to tell us both sides of the law and why it's legally difficult to know exactly if this is legal or not. I say to myself, if the legal expert can't really quite figure all that out, I don't really think I, the non-legal expert, am going to be able to do it. So rather than do that, I'm going to focus on what I think is best for the community college district and my people and the people that are voting and the college as a whole. So in that regard, I would say to me the lesser of the two evils would be to be on June. So at least we're only saying you're going to have 2 or 3 finals on one day, not all 4 or 5 finals on one day.
It's my turn.
Trustee Brown?
Brown, thank you. So, well, and I hear the arguments that are made, but again, if the whole focus of this conversation is to increase voter participation, I'm not sure we have a lot of choices because the information that was provided pretty much show that November favors more participation, unless I'm reading it incorrectly. So I would go with either one, but I think if we want to be in compliance, I think November would be what we do.
Can I just I agree with what you said, except for the fact that we really don't know, we don't, unless I missed it, the statistics, if we have an election in November, if there, the effect of voter fatigue for local elections, there is no statistics here, correct?
Correct. All we have are the turnout numbers for both
Statewide.
sets of elections.
So we really don't know.
Trustee Wah?
Yeah, there are several districts that have already moved over to the even year, and they have been on even year for some time, much to the consternation of the registrar recorder, but they went ahead and they were able to get in. And Long Beach is one of them, and I do know that, in their recent election where they ran during the general election, they had very robust turnout for their community college trustees and also a lot of participation. I don't know if it's necessarily more money or if it will cost anyone more money to run. I mean, it's possible. I think a lot of it depends on your particular sub-area that you represent. Even among us, where we run on the same years, we all raise different amounts of money, and it requires different amounts of money, and it depends on your electorate, and it depends, I think, on your own outreach into your communities. So I don't know if you have statistics on those districts that have already gone to even years, but since I also am involved in various political groups where we also track candidates who are coming in, I have to say, I mean, we keep our constituents and our members informed of who the candidates are and who we are supporting. I think it's much more difficult for us to keep tracking across March and then April, and then we have some elections in June and some then again in September and then November. I think that it's easier when you see organizations like the League of Women Voters, the National Women's Political Caucus. A consolidation is actually, I think, a benefit to keep our members informed. So I don't see some of the same downsides that others may have pointed out.
Okay, I've got some observations to make. None of the jurisdictions that are in my trustee area have yet acted on this. This is La Cañada, City of La Cañada, La Cañada Unified School District, City of Pasadena, Pasadena Unified School District. If I can be expansive, Sierra Madre, they're not exactly in my district, but I know elected office holders in all 5 of those jurisdictions, and I've talked with office holders in all 5 of those jurisdictions, and 100% of them, well, they're all going to have to do some shift. Some only a few months. They could shift just a couple of months to come into compliance, but none of the elected officials I've talked to, City of La Cañada Unified School District, City of Pasadena, PUSD, and City of Sierra Madre, none of the elected officials want to go on that November ballot because they know to what extent If they run in November versus June, they're going to be smothered, their campaign, their ability to communicate with voters and present their platform and to do their campaigning. It's going to be much more difficult to overcome the deluge of campaigning from other measures and candidates that will be on the November ballot, and will just swamp, their campaign efforts. That's why, several trustees have mentioned that it would be more expensive, considerably more expensive, to effectively campaign in a November election compared to a June election. With respect to the impact of this, to the extent you've got a higher bar to get over from the standpoint of fundraising to run, you're going to have fewer people running. There will be fewer people who will take the opportunity. You can also look at it from the standpoint that if you have entrenched incumbents, whoever goes, whatever jurisdiction, never mind PCC, whatever jurisdiction, if they go to November, where it's going to be more expensive and there's a higher hurdle for people to participate, you're going to have entrenched incumbents who are more protected from candidates stepping up and challenging them. And there are some who feel that November elections are more partisan, and all the jurisdictions I named, the cities, the school districts, the community college district, these are nonpartisan, but if they run in November, there's a possibility, some would say a likelihood, that there would be more partisan aspects to the campaigns that are being run. We're nonpartisan for a reason, I believe, and I haven't had any problem with people on this board of trustees since I've been here, who's a Democrat or Republican or independent or declined to state or libertarian or whatever else. So I also spoke with Dr. Raphael Sonnenschein, who's head of the Pat Brown Institute at Cal State LA. He's not here, but when I presented this to him and discussed with him, he felt that the concerns that I had about a June versus November election cycle and the impact it would have on the ability of people to run for office, the ability of people to run against incumbents, the ability of any candidate to get their message across were very sound and valid concerns if you have the option. And to me, everybody who's covered by the California Voter Participation Act is given the option. Statewide, not statewide primary. The Voter Participation Act does not say that you should go for the option that has the most people. I would argue that we should go for the option that's going to increase our participation, and both of them will. June, if you look at the figures, will probably increase our participation by 250%. Or, excuse me, 150%, maybe 200% increase. That's a substantial increase, and I think you will have voters that can be much more effectively communicated with by whatever candidate runs. With respect to the uncertainty on slide number 6, you talked about the uncertainty concerning when a term of office would begin, but I think you concluded your comments by, and then there was another slide that also went into that. I think you concluded, though, by saying that you weren't certain which way you would recommend, that the Voter Participation Act gives us the option to go in June or in November. There's a statute which talks about a consolidation in November for whatever reason, but that's an old statute, and that was, again, a consolidation for whatever reason for a particular type of election. I see the Voter Participation Act as saying you can go with June, you can go with November, you get to pick the month. Voter fatigue, that's been discussed. We should remember that in November elections, from now on, you're not going to see you're only going to see, you're going to see all of the propositions that are initiated by private groups, non-legislature non-legislature-initiated propositions. They'll all be on the November ballot. I don't know how many of the propositions on this ballot in November. We had a whole lot of propositions. I don't know how many of those were put on by the legislator, one or two, maybe? All the rest were propositions that were put on and had heavy campaigning. They had heavy campaigning, the mailers and the TV ads. That's the sort of thing, along with the judges and some of the other miscellaneous things. Those are the things that we can avoid getting swamped by and smothered by if we go with a June.
Mr. Chair, a point of order. I mean, the hour's getting late. I would suggest that we've had a thorough discussion of this, and I would suggest that we call the question.
Okay, calling the question is a motion, correct? Do we have?
No,
If you're-
question.
If you want to end debate.
Well,
So you have a motion before you can call.
There's a motion on the floor.
There's a motion on the floor.
there's a motion on the floor, but calling the question cuts off discussion.
Yes.
Right.
Cuts off discussion. That
And-
means
but-
that
but
we
you-
vote
but
without enough
you-
discussion.
And you vote without
well,
discussion
one-
on calling the question. We just vote
Yes.
right now on calling the question.
That's what I'm saying. We vote on whether we will call the question. We don't vote on the motion.
No, I agree,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So I'm calling the question.
Okay, advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor? Okay, it passes. I assume those are,
What's happening
It
down
was-
there, Tony?
okay.
Tony, cast your vote.
I did, but you guys are too slow.
We're going to call the question?
It's a two-thirds vote, I think.
Yeah, it takes
So-
a larger, and we passed that. Okay, so we were 6-1.
So
With-
Vote on the motion.
the motion on the floor, this is the motion that we have here, the resolution, but this doesn't have any date in it, whether it's June or,
No, the motion
The-
did have.
Motion on the
a date
floor is
for
November.
The next November,
Okay.
moving it 1 year and lining it up immediately.
Correct.
And as a point of clarification, the motion that Hoyt has made, is that one of these 4 resolutions?
It's 2 of them.
Okay, which 2 is it?
It's the ones that indicate November.
And we need 2 resolutions to accomplish what Hoyt has called a vote for. And the one
that's
resolution does what?
There's, Resolution 1, I'll call it, is the resolution that would either call for consolidation of the election in June or November, and the motion that's pending calls for November.
And which one of these resolutions is that?
I'm not sure I have exactly the same ones that you do.
The one.
No, so
I would suggest
online.
that it's the 2 on the right, the top and the
Right.
bottom,
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
564 and 565 that are
Right.
labeled November.
And- Right, and what does 564 do and what does 565 do?
Sure.
That's my question.
564 is the consolidation resolution, and then I refer to that as Resolution 1. Resolution 2 is the plan resolution, such that it really becomes effective only if the Board of Supervisors does not agree to consolidate your election.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The 564 consolidates the election, and I assume it consolidates it to a November date.
yes.
Yes.
That's
the-
correct.
And then
560
what does 565 parens November do?
and
That is the plan to consolidate.
Right. In other words, that's the safe harbor resolution, such that if for some reason the Board of Supervisors were to decide, oh, we're going to deny your consolidation request because there isn't space on the ballot, you can continue holding odd-numbered elections up to November of '22.
Okay, so let me state this to see if I understand it. So 564 parens November would consolidate to November, and it would consolidate at the earliest possible date.
That's correct, as it reads.
And then 565 paren November says if the county won't accept it that quickly, it would still be November, but we would put it off until they can
Yeah, you'd keep
upgrade their
trying.
system. Yes.
You'd keep trying, is
The
basically
earliest
what the
date
plan
when the
is.
county can accommodate us.
Correct.
Understood.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I was just wondering, I was looking at Resolution 564, it's called the even-numbered June. but it's November. Is that mislabeled?
Well, there's
Well,
two.
there are two versions there, so that we were trying to be prepared for the board going either direction.
Okay, let me make this clear, because this gets confusing, and it's
It
very
is,
simple.
yeah.
So if trustees want to do this election, even numbered, in November, they would vote for this resolution. Those that want to do June would defeat this resolution and have a...
That is correct.
substitute motion. Okay,
Or amend it.
thank you.
Okay, no further discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Okay,
We're voting for the November date.
yeah. Okay, the November date is defeated.
I'd like to
So,
make this...
Mr. Chair, if I could offer an additional motion, and that would be to adopt the Res 564 for the June date and 565.
Is there a second?
I will second
Before we
that.
do that, we have to replace that with the correct dates on that. The June we have is the older version, and you have sent the newer version. but
We've
it
sent a
came-
newer version.
Yes,
that
and
has-
that's the one that we put out there, and we have that in your gray packet.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
So, Hoyt, go ahead and make your motion.
My motion is that we approve the recommendations of the June dates for the election, and if there's no discussion on that, I would also call a question.
I'll second that, too.
I'll just ask a question
Yeah.
before we call the question. So now we're voting for a June election date at
Correct.
the earliest possible date.
Great. And,
Okay.
and Mr. Chair, the reason for my calling the question is I feel like we've had a very thorough and productive discussion of this, and we have a good sense of what the pros and cons are.
Yes,
So-
I am going to clarify a point here. We're voting now on a motion which calls for the elections to be held in June, and that we will make the shift in the earliest possible sequence to synchronize with the statewide even-year elections.
Actually, we're voting to call the question, then we're going to do that
Well,
vote.
just to clarify your question, yes.
No, I'm not asking a question, I'm making a statement. That's what
Yeah,
we're-
no, I
that's
thought your
what we're voting
question
on.
was, are we voting on, or maybe it's trustee Osterling's question, and the nature of my motion, and the motion would be to approve a June date as soon as practicable, or...
We're talking about June 2018.
Yes, correct.
That is correct.
That's correct.
And what I was about to make sure was clear, we're going to have the election, we are voting on elections in June, we're voting on doing it as soon as possible. The impact on the extension of the terms of office would be 7 months.
December
Correct.
1st
Yeah, instead of
to
December,
June.
it would be sometime in July.
But yes,
of the-
terms
of
would,
the-
yes, you're right,
following
terms
year,
would
beyond
begin
what
and
we are
end.
scheduled now.
Terms
Thank
would
you.
begin and end, I would recommend at the corresponding points in July.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? The motion passes 7-0 with the advisory vote voting yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Kinson.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have agenda item H2, approval of additions, deletions, and changes to the credit and non-credit curriculum.
So
You
moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded.
You will notice that in the packet we presented to you, we've also given you an executive summary as to the courses that are being added, the courses that are being deleted, and the reason for the addition and the deletion in each area. And in those cases where we're not deleting, a reason has been given to you as to why there are no deletions happening.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Passes 7-0. Adopt Resolution 536, authorization for temporary interfund cash borrowing.
This is a routine agenda item that we bring on a regular basis that will authorize the college to have intercash interfund cash borrowing.
I'll
That is, you move from one account to another account.
I'll move approval, and for the audience's benefit, I'll just point out that the administration is responsible to come to the board at the next meeting and announce when these kinds of interfund loans occur and are paid back.
Second.
Discussion? I have a question. The interfund borrowing, well, we have seen interfund, excuse me, borrowing on our agendas before. So if we pass this, we will still see items, let me finish the question. We will still see items on the ballot, or on our agenda, before any action is taken to transfer. Is that correct? Or is it going to be just information that we did it last week or something?
No, you will still see it you will still see it.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make clear. Otherwise, it looked like a pretty blank check measure. And is that covered by a bylaw?
It's covered by policy, my understanding is, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this doesn't change any administrative policy. Okay, so we will still see the interfund transfers. Good, okay. I had misunderstood that. I wondered if this was a...
Just a follow-up
change.
question on the same subject. If we are going to approve any actual interfund transfers as they occur, what purpose does Resolution 563 serve?
We will need time to prepare the documents for you if we're going to be waiting to bring that to you and then go back and prepare the documents. We may be behind in whatever work we're doing. Because what happens here is that we're already ready. We know what we will be doing, and we bring that to you for the interfund transfer on the agenda for you to approve. Isn't that correct, Dr. Story?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the past, we've approved these types of interfund transfers, but in the past, did we approve a resolution similar to 563?
Yes.
With the
Yes,
authorization?
we always do that. We do that on
Okay.
we do that.
That's an annual basis.
Annual basis, yes.
Thank you. Okay, that's what
Okay,
I didn't
thank
understand.
you. Pardon my infamiliarity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have a motion on this yet?
Move
We do.
approval.
John?
Oh.
No, I'm happy to make a motion and get a second, but I'd like to make a comment at the appropriate time.
I'll second it, so you can make his comment.
If the president
any-
would call
any
on
further
me,
discussion?
I would appreciate it.
Okay. Who made the motion?
I made the motion,
And I seconded it.
Seconded, okay. Is there any discussion?
please.
Please, no. Oh, yes, John.
Okay, so from my perspective, I don't believe that we need to require the administration to come back for an approval. I believe this should be authority enough to make those interfund transfers, and as it says, they do need to come back and report to us. Now, we're talking about, it's like if you had a checking account and a savings account, it's like talking to your wife about, do you have to get approval to move it back and forth between the two? Okay? And to me, that's just a cash flow issue. Obviously, if we have cash flow difficulties, we want to be alerted to that. The fact that they're reporting out on these interfund transfers would alert us to that. It isn't that they're taking funds out of one fund and we're still approving all the expenses that have to be written. It's like both my wife and I are signing all the checks that are going out. I just realized there isn't enough in the checking account right now until somebody gets paid, so I'm transferring savings over until we get paid, and then maybe I transfer it back. So as far as I'm concerned, it says blanket resolution for interfund, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that, as long as it also says you're obligated to report to us when you do it. So in my opinion, which, again, I'm not the least legal person here in the room, in my opinion, you don't need to bring back another document for approval, but you do need to bring back a document of information.
And really, we don't anticipate using this. It's just a standard practice of having this approved up front. And it's really, if it is needed, it's because of the funding received from the state. You know, we're not receiving set funds each month. There's a cycle where we receive funds from the state, and we'll receive funds in a delay.
Late, yeah.
But we don't anticipate needing to borrow funds from any, transfer between any of our funds at this point.
Okay, so what I just heard John say is different than what was explained, and I'm also okay with it, but I was told that any time before this has happened, you were going to get the Board of Trustees approval, and what John said is, no, we're approving it in advance, and you need to report back to us.
Dr. Story?
Joe? I'll have Joe clarify.
Thank you.
This is very simple.
Good evening. So this is an annual request for us to get approval prior to the need for a transfer. We do come back in the event that we do have to transfer funds to inform the board. However, this is the request for the prior approval. We do not, as Dr. Storti stated, do not anticipate needing to do the transfer, but we ask at this point in time, at this point in the year, because of the timelines of cash coming in and expenses going out with the timelines of LACO being closed. So it's truly just a cash flow issue.
Understood. And you would be informing us after the fact,
After the
or you
fact.
would be seeking our permission before?
After the fact. Permission
you.
is being requested
Understood.
tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Passes 7-0. Thank you. Adoption, let's see. Item 6, adoption of 2017-2018 academic calendar. Do we have a report, Dr. Verdine?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Vice President Juni, since he chaired the committee, to present the new calendar to you. We have taken your advice into consideration, and this has gone through the various shared governance processes of the college. Dr. Juni?
Yes, thank you, and good evening. So I just really quick, and if you have questions after I say it, we'll kind of summarize what this calendar does compared to previous calendars. So on the left side that is showing the fall semester, so starting with June, it is very similar to what Pasadena City College has had for the fall semesters in the past. The difference is in August, you'll notice that there is a professional development day, a flex day, that is occurring on the 18th of August, which is the Friday, the 25th of August, which is the Friday before classes start on the 28th. This year, the Professional Development Day, the Flex Days, were embedded in the middle of both fall and spring, and so this is actually putting it the Friday before classes start in the fall. That's also when convocation will happen. And in the past here, we've had a Student Success Day for students on that Friday, and so that will be pushed back to Thursday. So Thursday will be about helping students get oriented before the semester starts, and Friday will be about faculty, classified staff, and administrators having the opportunity for various professional development activities. So that's really the only difference in the fall. On the winter and spring side of the calendar, so looking at January, there's a number of things that are different. So we have winter there, as we do this year, but the start date for winter is on January 3rd, as opposed to this year where it's the Monday after the first week of January. It is a 6-week winter, as we have right now, and then the flex day in spring is embedded in the middle as it is right now, and so you'll see it on March 15th. That stayed in the middle as opposed to before, to help preserve a little bit of a break between the end of spring and the beginning of summer for prep of classrooms as well as the submissions of grades.
Right, thank you. Is there any, do we have a motion?
If I can say one more thing, I'm sorry.
Certainly.
So there is actually one error that I need to make you aware of before you approve it. It's really simple, but that is if you look on the spring side, I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll mine down so I can get the exact date. June 19th should be colored green, indicating no classes are in session that day. And that's just to be consistent with the color code that's used throughout the calendar.
Okay.
I move to
Thank you.
approve.
Second.
June 19
Should be green.
June 19th of 2018
2018.
should be colored green, which indicates no classes are in session.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Not yet.
That's discussion.
Discussion?
No, discussion. Oh, discussion, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you were voting.
Yeah. So I would say that this is one of the few issues that does come up to us that really directly impacts the students, right? So speaking for myself as a trustee and not as a student body, because I know that this has gone through the calendar committee and the various constituency groups, and I know that students have shown support for it, but speaking as myself and speaking as a trustee and kind of just putting my own perspective on it, I do see a lot of flaws with this calendar. For example, I would say a huge issue is having only one day between the end of the summer intersession and the beginning of spring. As a student myself, I know that like being bombarded with all those finals and having to, you know, like get myself together, reorganize all my materials, have time to kind of reflect and realize, you know, how can I improve myself from the previous semester? What can I do differently? One day is not enough for that. And I would say like that would, you know, impact student success in the future. And, you know, the main mission of the college is to increase student success and encourage student learning. So I think that one day is a really huge issue. And I'm sure student groups would agree that that one day is not sufficient for students. In addition, that's something that I did realize and that was brought up was the order of classes which are taken by students. Some students do have to take prerequisites in order to succeed to the following class. I think having one day after you're given your final, after you've taken your final exam, and then, you know, there's like 4 days between that before you get your final grade. I don't think that's fair to students to like, for them to be enrolled in a class that they think they need, that they can remain in to transfer out, and then realize that, oh wait, you know, I didn't pass that class, and I was just told this after 1 week of school, and I'm already kind of committed to this class. So I would say that one day is not enough, and just myself, I don't think I wouldn't be encouraged to take summer classes because I would know I only have that one day in between it. And then I'm sure that would also reflect the views of many students.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion?
I just wanted to add, the
Trustee Fellow.
intercession, excuse me, thank you. The intercession is, it's 7-week classes?
The winter intercession are 6-week classes. The summer intercession is an 8-week time period for which there will be offered both 6 and 8-week classes.
I've never seen a college begin the second semester that late in February, you know, the spring semester.
Any other comments, questions?
So
Trustee Wah?
Trustee Grippian's points, are these changes from what were normally occurred in the past on the calendar?
Well, this is our second winter intercession. This January 2017 will be our first one, and this is the second one. And on that calendar committee, we have representations from students, from faculty, from classified staff, and from management. And my understanding is that the vote was in favor of this calendar?
Yes, it wasn't unanimous. But it was a majority with representation from all of those groups.
And we have this. We've always had. In 2017, we have a 6-week winter.
We have a 6-week winter this winter.
Right.
So starting in January, we have a 6-week winter.
And this calendar is also a 6 winter.
And 5 years ago, for a number of years, I'm not sure the exact number, we offered 6-week winters as well. And so we're returning to what we did a number of years back. This year, this starting in January, basically is the first time we'll have a winter we had a 4-year break basically from winter. And so the calendar was very similar if you go back 5 years when we were offering winter. When you offer winter, it pushes the start of spring later. There are other community colleges in the state that offer winters. They also have later starts than the traditional college that would have just a fall-spring primary sessions without a winter intersession. And so if you compare across the state, you will also find other community colleges besides Pasadena City College that have a later spring start because they offer a winter intersession.
Trustee Wah?
So just to clarify, so it's not just the winter session. I was just trying to think about the issues that Trustee Grippian raised regarding even just the one day in between the spring and then the start of summer, which, so it seems like we're like extreme. So we have a very long period between the end of our fall session and then we start our winter intersession and then the start of spring, I guess. So it's like almost, what, a 13-week? Is that what it is?
It's
If
about
you don't take a winter session.
It's about 9 weeks between the end of fall and the beginning of spring.
Right.
Because we have that winter intersession along with the winter break, which is also a significant break.
Right. So I know the concerns were then that, would we have sort of a fallout, I guess, from that long period of time, and then we have no break in between the spring and the summer, I think, which is what Trustee Grippian talked about. So maybe that's going to be good. So I guess I would just say I would still encourage us to track the success of the continuity and the perseverance of those students as we go through and historically collect this information. I know, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dr. Verdin.
No. What I was going to say was that when we start winter intersession in January of 2018, we do have a almost 12 days break in between the end of fall 17 and the start of winter 18, because the campus closes on the 21st of December, and the fall of 2017 is over on December 17th. So we have from December 18th through January the 3rd before we starting the winter. So we do have more than 2 weeks between the end of fall.
Trustee Hoyt?
Yeah, so just so I understand, the concern is the June transition? Is that your concern?
Yes.
Your concern? Okay.
Trustee Osterling?
I just wanted to follow up on Hoyt. So first of all, Trustee Garippian, we're glad we have a student trustee and someone up here representing the students, and this is important. But I'm trying to understand, are you referring to the start of the June 2017 first day of summer? Is that the concern?
So it's the June 2018.
June 2018?
Yes,
Okay.
You'll see that the final exams are highlighted in yellow, and then there's supposed to be a green gap between the 19th and the 20th, and that 19th is the only day that students would have off until the 20th, which would be the first day of classes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have two questions. One, I thought somebody was asking this question, but I didn't understand the answer if it was given. Going back to when let's see, this winter intersession that we have coming up in January, and then 5 years ago and for a number of years prior to that, how many days gap was there between the end of the winter intersession and the start of the spring, typically? I don't want exact, dates, but we talk about having basically no gap here, or it's like a day's gap. Were we giving 3, 5, or anything like that in the past?
So it sounds like you're asking about the gap between the end of winter
Yes.
and the beginning of spring. I believe
That was the first question she was concerned about.
No, I thought her question was, the concern was the gap between the end of spring and the beginning of summer.
Correct.
I don't believe she has the same concern, because I think there is sufficient time. There's a little bit larger window between the end of winter and the beginning of spring, because there's a few days where the college is open but there are no classes in session, and then there's also a 4-day weekend, so that it allows for a larger separation between the end of winter and the beginning of spring. But I don't want to put words in your mouth, so...
exactly.
Okay, and so I believe the concern is that into finals for spring, and then there's one day where there are no classes, and then there is the start of summer session. So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, there is a week of finals. Many classes are actually done on those first 5 days of finals before you go into the next week. And so the no break basically are those that have finals on the last day of finals or on the Sunday, which there are very few. We have Sunday finals marked off because there are a few classes that we offer on Sunday, and so they have their finals on that day. Most of the classes will be completed with finals done Friday before the summer session would start on the following Wednesday. So there is a little bit more there that's not shown, but she's correct. There are some students that will finish their finals on Monday. If they're taking summer session classes, they won't have any classes on the following day, and then they could start the summer session the next day. Now, the same thing about when finals are, not all classes start. That's the beginning of our summer session, but it depends how we schedule them. They don't all start on that day. The deans are quite aware that there are some classes, as was mentioned, that have prerequisites. It's very likely that those will start later. They won't start because we need time to allow faculty to submit their grades, check prerequisites, so that students are in the appropriate class. And so that was part of the conversation. And so not all classes in the summer not all classes in spring are going to end on the last day of finals, and not all classes in summer are going to start on the first day of summer. It depends how they're scheduled, and there are many factors that impact how they're scheduled.
Okay, thank you. I was concerned about, I misunderstood the concern that was expressed initially. My other question is a general one. In the 3 years I've been on this board, we were talking about, are we going to have winter, and what was it like when we had it, and was it going to come back? Okay, we've got it. One of the things that was brought up during these discussions related to the synchronization of the end of our spring session and when high school students in our districts graduate and can then go and take summer school classes here. That's what I did. Graduated from high school Monday, on a Friday, Monday, I was enrolled over here at summer school. Does this schedule we've got now, what we're operating on now, and this one, give us that advantage? Because it seemed to me people were concerned that if we ended the spring semester if we ended it earlier and then started summer, well, there'd be high school students who couldn't start the summer session. So have we gained an advantage there, just in general?
Yeah, the start of summer is late. Compared,
it's later.
It's later, and so I don't know if all high schools are out, but my guess would be, and I'm not a betting man, but my guess would be high schools are all done by June 20th. They're having
more would be done than we had
more
previously.
will be done.
So
They're finishing up either the 8th of June or the 15th of June, and so by having it a late summer as this is would probably allow most, if not all, high school students the opportunity to take classes here.
I think that's a big advantage, and it's what I did. And if it were out of sync, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Thank you. Do I hear a motion? Or are we on the motion already? We're on the motion, okay. Advisory vote?
I have one quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were voting.
Yeah. Something else that was mentioned that I would want to bring up was there were a couple of options that were brought up in the committee. I'm aware. I think there were like 4 calendar options. And like I said before, I am just expressing my views as a board member and not as an associate student. But just as an example, the associate students did vote for an option that isn't presented to us tonight. It was called the third option. And just to give you all a kind of an understanding of what the advantages and disadvantages of that option was that it would have 5-week courses during the winter intersession, so it would cut down classes by 1 week. However, that 1 day between spring and summer would be increased. So just to kind of throw that out there, that was also an option that the associate students did vote on and did have support from the student side.
Thank you.
I have a question. I just
Yes,
want to ask
Trustee
you
Brown.
something. So the students are voting for 5 weeks instead of 6. Wouldn't this be in the purview of the faculty to decide how they can spread out their classes to better teach the students? I mean, I don't understand how the students can mold the classes that way.
Well, it was presented to us as one of the calendar options, and I guess I would say kind of like during our committee, during our board meetings, we are just students, and that was the option that appeared that seemed the best to us. But like you said, faculty does have a huge part in it because they are the ones organizing the classes.
Yeah.
So their views were presented. You can contest to this at the calendar committee, correct? So that's kind of the result. So yes, that is a huge issue. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Approval of Memorandum of Understanding with the California School Employees Association, Chapter 777, regarding the 2016-2017 winter break.
We are recommending that the board approve this MOU between CSEA and the Community College District about how vacation days would be used over the winter break.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is this advisory vote on this?
Oh, is it?
Yes, just when everybody can vote.
Okay. Advisory vote?
Aye.
Trustees? Passes 7-0. Thank you. Information items. Number 1, Board Bylaw 2771, Media Relations. Dr. Verdine, is there a report?
This is an information item that
Yes.
is a board bylaw, so it is it is introduced by the board, so.
So this is an item that I'm speaking to. So this is a follow-up from the discussion that we had at our November 30th meeting, which trustees Hilsman and Fellow were not present for. So you
Shucks.
missed all of that robust discussion. However, I think there were some really valid points brought up. There were a lot of that were highlighted as a result of bringing this bylaw forward. And I just wanted to clarify that it was in response to the retreat that we had, feedback that we got from the retreat back in August of the board, and where we ourselves indicated that we would like to clarify the guidelines for a brighter line so that we knew what those had better guidance. However, it was really clear from the discussion that the proposed bylaw really fell short of what we were hoping for, and it was the draft that was submitted in this packet that came from Trustee Martin, and I think everyone agreed that it moved us closer to where we wanted to be. So I wanted to thank Trustee Martin again for having submitted something that could be a starting point for further discussion. So while at the end of the discussion we agreed that some procedures may be needed, and the draft submitted by Trustee Martin was a good starting point for that, for maybe looking at that again, I wanted to suggest, I wanted to get some closure, I guess, on this item, and recommend to President Selvage that perhaps he would consider an ad hoc committee be appointed to continue working on these guidelines. And I think the trustees themselves recommended Trustee Hilsman and Trustee Fellow, who both have media experience. And I don't know that I would necessarily, I think there were a lot of kind of trigger words that we talked about. I don't know that I would necessarily even call it a media bylaw, because I think it was really intended to be more of a communications policy guideline, and that that ad hoc committee take the time to review and craft the guidelines, because the bylaws are really written for the trustees, by the trustees, to guide our own behavior. There are things you can't legislate. You can't legislate, respect, courtesy, and luckily we have that in our culture, and we will continue to strengthen that in our culture. But, I do think that crafting guidelines that help us operate to the highest standard possible as trustees is good, and so that's my recommendation.
Thank you. As a point of clarification, well, we could have an ad hoc. This originated, though, in the policy subcommittee, correct?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
However, Trustee Hilsman is not part of that policy subcommittee. Neither Trustee Brown nor I have media experience, which I think that the communication experience, I guess, which I think that the trustees indicated they thought would be helpful to craft better guidelines. I would certainly be willing to continue to work on it as part of a bylaws. You may, in the reorganization, ask for trustees who might want to be reassigned to different committees, and maybe there will be a different subcommittee. But I just offer that to you for consideration.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will take a look at the subcommittee lineup here as we go forward into this year. I like the idea that we have people working on this who have experience and qualifications, formal qualifications in journalism and the media. If trustees Hilsman and Fellow are on an ad hoc committee, I would strongly recommend that they view the tape of previous discussions since we were both absent.
I have.
So I appreciate that. Is there anybody on the board who thinks we need to discuss any of these points further tonight?
I have a question. So are we going to appoint an ad hoc committee, or is that something we would need to do on an agenda?
I'm taking that under, that's a prerogative of the president. I'm taking that under consideration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want discussion from the trustees on this revised version now?
I'm
or do
asking
you
right
wanna
now
just-
if anybody
do you
wants
wanna
to
just-
take time at this meeting to do that.
I would move that, given the late...
It's not an action item.
Understood, but it's an information item, and if you want comments from the trustees, I would move that we put this off to our next meeting, given the late hour, for comment.
Yes. Well, I don't see any further impetus to get into this further tonight, and that's what we will do. Let's see. Superintendent President's report.
Thank you, President Selvage. Congratulations on your election, and congratulations to the new board. And I would like to thank you also, outgoing President Roy, for the support you've given me and the work that we have done at the college during your presidency. As you know, I did mention to you earlier on that the college has been working very closely with all the high schools in the district, and I'd like to reassure you that we have in our district, as you know, 12 private high schools and 13 public schools. And Vice President Juni and Vice President Olivo have put together, if you want, some kind of assignments where every single instructional dean and student services dean and also some executive directors and directors from student services have been assigned to all those schools as liaison officers. Their assignment is to meet with the principals on a regular basis, share information, even though we do have a we have an outreach program that goes to the school, but now we have a higher level meeting with the schools where a college official in the presence of a dean will be meeting with the high school principal so that we can have better communication, and that should help in creating that seamless transition from the K-12 to the community college. And every month, each liaison, that is each dean or director that is assigned to those schools, will be presenting a report to the vice president, and we will collate that and we will be sending you those reports on a monthly basis so that you can see what we are doing with the high schools in our district. The PCC Foundation had a very successful scholarship celebration last Friday in the Saxon Auditorium, and as you know, many of you are present. The foundation did award $220,000 in scholarship to 228 students. And over the course of a year, the foundation awards more than $750,000 in scholarships. And many of you attended yesterday a donor event of all people who've supported the foundation over the years, and that was a very successful event. As you know, when we look at the college and we look at the students we serve, we do also realize that there are around 33% of the students who come to the college that do not really join our Pathways program or on some of the other programs that we have, such as Puente, Ujima, the tutoring centers, and so on. What we are doing right now, we want to create something that will attract those students, that will be directed towards those students that are not really involved in anything at the college. So over the next 3 years, we will be awarding grant money to college teams of at least 5 individuals comprising of 1 administrator, 1 faculty, and 1 classified staff, and 1 student at least, that will come up with projects that will be directed towards those students. And the ultimate goal is to be able to scale up those programs so that 100% of the students who attend Pasadena City College will be receiving some kind of support that will help them reduce their time to graduation and be more successful in what they are doing. Some congratulations are in order to our English professor, Kathy Cotaras, whose latest novel, The Best Possible Answer, was named one of the 10 best young adult books of November 2016 by Paste Magazine. And this gives you an example of what kind of faculty we have at the college here. And also, from our kinesiology department, we have congratulations to Daryl Taylor, who earned a gold medal at the North American Cup of the USA Fencing Organization. Daryl competed in the veteran 60 épée competition, showing that age is no factor in one's athletic ability. Our speech and debate team has received also a top honor. They have been recognized for winning the greatest number of sweepstakes points at tournaments organized by the Southwest Collegiate Forensics Association. This is our college's first such honor in more than a decade, and it speaks to the deep strength of this year's debaters. What a wonderful work for our students. We've also received word last Monday on our Frontier and Network grant application. There were 50 colleges, 2-year colleges and 4-year colleges nationwide that were invited by the Aspen Institute together with the Microsoft Foundation to apply for that grant. Out of the 50, only 26 applied. They've narrowed that field down now to 12, and Pasadena City College is one of the 12. And they will be awarding in March also 6 awards, and we do feel that we have a very strong chance of getting one of those awards. And as you know, the Aspen Foundation Award will also be announced in March. I would like to thank the college, faculty, staff, administrators, the board for a very successful year at Pasadena City College. We look forward to another successful year next year, and I wish you all happy holiday season. This concludes my report.
Okay, we will now hear from announcements by shared governance representatives, or representative, singular, as it is.
As the designated survivor, I have no report. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas.
Okay, proposed future agenda items. Do any trustees?
Board reports.
The rest of the board.
Yeah.
The board members.
Oh, well, I was, okay, this is jumped around here. And Board of Trustees, right.
J1, yeah.
Starting at my left.
All right. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the 2 students in the crowd who have managed to sit through an almost 3-hour meeting. For those of you wondering who the students in the crowd were today, I do chair an ad hoc committee on the Associated Students. We are going to be attending some board of trustees meetings and just kind of taking notes and reviewing them in our committee. So those are 2 of the 12 members on the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Brown? Trustee Hilsman, how is Singapore?
Out of Singapore, that's me. Jet lagged, glad, I think glad to be back in the U.S. And congratulations to Dr. Selvage and to Dr. Fellow and to Mr. Osterling on their elections, and I look forward to working with them this coming year.
Trustee Wah.
Yes, I wanted to congratulate the coaches, the debate coaches for the intramural debate. I don't know if how many people got a chance to see it. It's really phenomenal to be able to see our students. So really want to thank Dean Arnwine and Dean Fettner for all of the support that they give our students. And I think that they have an intercollegiate debate coming up in January, and I've encouraged them to make sure to invite all of the trustees. So it's they really did a great job. I think that we placed very high in the San Diego debates. I also wanted to once again reiterate to the trustees that we will be putting together some CTE video presentations and training sessions for the trustees. You see, they're short 20-minute videos. We should be launching the introductory video, which will go out to the CEOs as well as the trustees somewhere around January, depending on the editing schedule. And let's see, I think that's it.
Trustee Osterling.
I want to commend the foundation for the two events they held that have already been discussed. I want to thank our student trustee for speaking up. We're glad you're on the board, and we like to hear from the student perspective. I want to wish everybody that remains a happy holiday, but I want to take the rest of this time to personally thank our outgoing president. And even though she's no longer going to be the president of our board, as many of you know, she's very active in the API, the Asian Pacific Islanders. She's on our state board. She's on the committee for the Strong Workforce Initiative, and she's also involved in the league at the national level. So she's still going to be very busy and involved in community college activities. She's just a bundle of energy. But on a personal note, she really mentored me and took me under her wing in my first year here. It's a very steep learning curve to become a trustee at the community college, and you really helped me go up that curve. So thank you very much.
Trustee Martin.
Well, I'd like to, so I've been on the board a long time, and usually at these organizational meetings, there's a few very important things that happen. Normally we take a break so we can go back and get cake. Now, that didn't happen.
I just assumed there was a cake.
But that's okay, because I never take part of the cake that we have anyway, but it's important to have the cake because normally with the cake comes some rose princesses. So normally we have these rose princesses that occasionally come in.
Where are they?
I mean, this is my chance to rub shoulders with royalty here, right? And I'm missing it. And my one story is, you know, back when I was a bachelor and even more excited, waiting for the Rose Princesses to come, and then I was elected board president, and I couldn't wait to talk to them, and that was, of course, the night I was hoarse. And so I had absolutely no voice, could say nothing. But anyway, but the other thing that we stop and do that is actually somewhat serious, and I think we need to schedule this at our next meeting, only for but 3 minutes. But we need to stop and publicly, when there are people here, thank Linda Waugh for the phenomenal year that she guided this institution through. She did. It is a tremendous amount of work for a normal person, and you know, anything Linda does means like squared, right? The amount of energy that will go into it. And she did that for us, and she led us wisely. And we've had, you know, some very difficult issues, and she represented us everywhere like she always does so well. And so I really hope at the next meeting we take 3 minutes when there's a crowd and do this one more time.
If I may add, this is the plan for the January meeting.
Okay.
This is the plan for the January meeting.
You know, I want to really thank my fellow trustees. It's I don't think you can do this work unless you really have a great board that you can work with, and I really have just high respect for all of the trustees. And as I said earlier in the previous item, you can't legislate respect, you can't legislate courtesy. Those are things that are part of our culture. And so I want to thank you for all of your very, very kind remarks, but it takes a village, and I really have to give the thanks back to all of my fellow trustees.
I do want to say one other thing to give Linda at least a little hope or encouragement in her going out. So you didn't get a cake, you didn't get the Rose Princesses, but you got what nobody else ever got. You got a member of the Board of Governors.
That's true.
Who came and spoke. So I want you to at least take heart in that nobody else has ever got a member of the Board of Governors. So.
Trustee.
Something about the Royal Court. I was informed last year, we did not have the court here either, and I was informed that the court comes here only when there is a PCC princess in that court.
I think
Don't
you're
need to
correct.
remind us.
This is an unusual year when that happens, when it happens that there isn't at least one, but I think you are correct.
When I was here, it was still, all the princesses, the queen and all the princesses had to be enrolled students at PCC. That was the original deal.
You're dating yourself.
I know. Hey, like everybody knows. Okay. Trustee Fellow.
Thank you, President Salvage. Dr. Verdian tonight gave some examples of the kind of faculty that we have here at Pasadena City College, and I'd like to add to that a bit. As you know, I was in Italy teaching, and fortunately, in the complex I was at, the educational complex, was the Pasadena City College students and faculty, and I spent a great deal of time with them. For some reason, they really didn't care if I was a trustee. I didn't think they knew, but they liked me, so they asked me to spend time with them, and I enjoyed it. And the professors, Dr. Rita D'Amico of Foreign Languages and Dr. Jennifer Noble of PCC Psychology Department, I found to be very truly dedicated to what they were doing. And I was invited to join Dr. Noble and the PCC students on a 4-day trip to Palermo, Italy, where our students here at PCC took part in a unique exchange with the young immigrant students who boarded boats with hundreds of others to escape their country and to sail to Palermo for a new life, leaving behind family and friends. They were here mostly by themselves. They brought nothing with them but a desire to have a better life, or just a life. And some of them never made it to Italy because of the horrific journey across the seas. In Palermo, Dr. Noble did something very creative that I wish my faculty, more creative than my faculty there, with the help of other PCC professors who have connections with what was going on in Palermo. And she put together meetings with groups of educators who are working with these young people who are arriving daily from Syria and Africa and who have nothing now but are being educated as part of the Sicilian community. And we walked through some very seedy areas with the students, very poor areas of Sicily where these students are living. And our PCC students had hours upon hours of discussions about the plight of the immigrants. And in one session, PCC students were seated next to the new immigrants, and we had some great discussions, even though our students did not speak Italian, but they did a good job in the beginning Italian class, and they did do very well. I was very proud of them. In one session, in another session, they did role-playing, and the new immigrants played the role of the guards, of the police, and Italian authorities, and our PCC students played the role of immigrants. And they really got a first-hand look at the horror, because some of these people are sent back, some of them are imprisoned, and it was an eye-opening experience for these students, and they talked to me a great deal about it. And they said this was the most worthwhile teaching experience they've ever been involved. This is the highest impact of teaching, when you can take students abroad and get them involved. And they came back from Italy more worldly and with an enthusiasm to really improve the plight of others and this world I think we live in. And I simply want to salute these two professors that you sent over. They were just outstanding. They became good friends, and we had dinner quite often. and especially Dr. Noble, who put together this enlightening trip. I've never seen a professor do something so innovative, and I think she deserves some kind of commendation for that. It was really a sobering experience, and I just mentioned this to educate others about the fine job the PCC faculty and students are doing, and they were great ambassadors, Dr. Verdian for PCC, and it was my honor to spend a great deal of time with them. And so it was a great experience. Not as great as last year when I walked out of the building and there was Pope Francis and waving to me. So that was very nice, but we didn't have that this year. But this was a sobering experience, and I just want you to, when the faculty come back, if you can say something to them, they did a great job. And I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays, and again, congratulations to our former president, and congratulations to our new president. I'm sure you'll do a good job, and that's it.
I've just got a couple of things to say. First of all, I want to express my gratitude and the gratitude of the board to Linda for what she brought us through this year. When she took office, we were on probation. Well, we're still on probation, but we have a pretty good feeling for how the follow-up visit went, and what the likely outcome is going to be when the full Accreditation Commission considers their next action first week of January. I had a lot of challenges, and thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I want to express my gratitude for my fellow trustees for electing me president. It's going to be a challenging year. Every time you hear from me, it seems like I'm always telling you about what the challenges are with the budget. Okay, we've got that, but there are other things as well. And as Jeff Baum pointed out, the thing we need to focus on is the student success. We need to be able to tell whether or not we're achieving that. We've got to figure out ways to determine what's working, what we need to fix or change or make better. So that's the main focus I'm going to be looking at for this coming year. I think that's my comments for now. I have a comment upon adjournment. Proposed future board business meeting dates. Didn't we just? Yes, we've done that. Yes. Okay. Okay. And proposed future agenda items. Now you can. And we do have the 3 minutes with a large crowd at our next meeting for Linda and cake.
Yeah. Well, the cake is up to you two, but.
Yes.
So
3
we
minutes
had,
would be nice.
we had a bylaw to add administrative procedures, which the trustees who were present at that meeting did approve, but we didn't have enough of a voting quorum. So that bylaw needs to be brought back so that we can have a full vote. It needed 5 votes.
Well, the bylaw, right?
Right.
Yes, we will bring that.
Okay.
We will have the subcommittee submit it, and we'll bring it here.
So it's the resubmission of the
Yes.
one that we did approve.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that concludes, excuse me, announcements. Adjournment is the next item. I'd like to, before I bang the gavel here, sort of follow up on some of the sentiments that Trustee Fellow expressed this time of year, the holidays and all that. I recall the last few lines of a 19th century Christmas carol, Good King Wenceslas, and the sentiments that are expressed in that, I think, have application for people of any faith or people of no faith at all even. And it's, therefore, Christian men, be sure wealth or rank possessing, he who now will bless the poor will himself find blessing. So, we're adjourned.